Now let's talk about the integumentary system, or in other words, the skin. Those two words are basically analogous to each other. You can say skin, you can call it the integumentary system, talking about the same thing. The skin is an organ. So this is the largest single organ in the body. The reason it's an organ is because it is made up of similar tissues that are all working in conjunction together. I'm going to read just the sentence out of your book because I really like this. It says, it's talking about an advertisement for a coat. It says, would you be enticed by an advertisement for a coat that is waterproof, stretchable, washable, and permanent press, that invisibly repairs small cuts, rips, and burns, and that is guaranteed to last a lifetime with reasonable care? And of course, we'd all be interested in a coat like that, and it points out that basically we already have one of those in our skin. So we often take our skin for granted, but it's a pretty amazing organ in the things that it's able to do. And it protects us, it keeps things inside, keeps things outside that we don't want inside. So it's a pretty amazing thing that's happening here. So we're going to talk first about the structure, the functions of the skin, and then we'll look at the skin, what we call the skin derivatives. Parts of the skin that are involved in producing different things. We'll look at those each in turn as well. So what I want you to do now is to think of the functions of the skin, the integumentary system. What exactly does it do? And so go ahead and pause this recording and write down as many functions as you can. Functions that we talked about when we did an overview of the systems or that you remember from your reading. And try to do this without looking back at your reading and see what you can come up with. Okay, we're back again. Let's write down some of the functions of the skin. So one of the major functions, of course, is protection. And we can make a long list of things that our skin protects us from, but some of the major ones, so as we're walking around, as we're moving every day, we're bumping into things. It protects us from bumps and mechanical damage. Chemical damage, so we come in contact with things. You drop some lemon juice on your skin. On your skin, that's okay. If you were to put lemon juice on an open wound, you know how much that hurts and understand why it's important that the skin is protecting you from that chemical damage. Bacterial damage. So there's interesting thing to think about, that there are more bacteria living on your skin than there are number of cells in your body. And that's the bacteria outnumber you by 3 times, maybe 4 times in the number of cells. And so we like to think of ourselves as our own personal, we're a person, but maybe more appropriately we could think of ourselves as a house for the bacteria that live on. And don't necessarily get scared because all that bacteria isn't bad. We often associate bacteria with disease and things. Majority of the bacteria that associate with us are beneficial or they don't hurt us, but there are some pathogenic bacteria that we want to avoid, and that's where our skin comes in. It keeps those bacteria from getting inside. If any of it does start to get inside, we also have our white blood cells that are there to try to get rid of them as well. And so our skin is our first line of defense. If you're thinking about immunity, fighting off disease, our skin is our first line of defense. Also radiation, especially ultraviolet radiation. And you may say, well, when I go out in the sun, I get burned. Well, after you get burned, most likely your skin's going to become tan, it's going to become darker. And the reason it does that is to protect you in the future from ultraviolet radiation. We've mentioned keratin already. We'll talk more about keratin. And then also melanin. And melanin is produced by your skin to help protect you from UV damage. Then also from heat. So it protects your body from changes in heat, hot or cold, and then also protects us from drying out. start losing all that water. So we've got all this, we're 70% water, we've got to stay that way. So we've got to keep that water from leaving our body, especially when we're living, since we're land animals, we're constantly drying out, and so our skin keeps that water inside. Another function of our skin is thermal function. So it keeps our body at the right temperature. If we get too hot, then we're going to start sweating. This is where the derivatives come in, our sweat glands. And if we get too cold, we're going to start shivering. Our body's able to control that. It's our thermostat. It keeps us at the right temperature. Then also there is some excretion. So when we sweat, for example, we get rid of salts. Also, there's urea in our sweat, which we associate with the kidneys and the urinary system, but it's partially a excretory system as well. And then vitamin D is also important. This is an important vitamin that is produced as we come in contact with the sun. It's produced in our skin cells as we go out into the sunlight. And so this is what the skin does. Very important functions, as you can see. And so now we're going to look at the different layers of the skin, what they do and how they function. So here we go. Let's take a look at what the integumentary system looks like. So here's a slide showing the integumentary system, our skin, over on the right. And you'll notice that the skin is basically made of two layers. There's the epidermis and the dermis. The epidermis is all epithelial tissue, as we mentioned when we talked about the different types of tissues. The dermis, the dermal layer, is dense connective tissue. So the epidermal layer, when we think about skin, this is the part of the skin that we can see. When we think about skin, we're usually thinking about the epidermal layer, but the dermal layer is actually much bigger than the epidermal layer, as we'll see in the next slide here. And this is where the dermal layer is where the blood vessels, the nerve endings, all those things are located in the dermal level. The epidermis layer is mainly functioning in protection, and then also in producing keratin and melanin, which is a pigment that we see. Let me jump down to this picture here so you can see the relative differences in the sizes of the epidermis and the dermis. Here's the epidermis, very thin layer on top, and the dermis is a very thick layer here. Notice that the epidermis is made up of stratified squamous epithelial cells. So this is our layer of mini cells, flattened cells, all piled on top of each other. And these are what slough off as we move around every day. Something to point out here, the epidermal layer is avascular. There are no blood vessels going into the epidermal layer. And you can prove this to yourself if you want to, or you may have done this. I've seen kids in elementary and middle school do this before. If you take a pin or a needle and you stick it under just the very top layer of your skin, and you can stick it in there, and it won't hurt because there's no nerve endings in the epidermal layer, and it won't bleed because there's no blood vessels in the epidermal layer. It's basically dead skin. So when you're looking at somebody, all you're seeing is dead skin, basically. That's what you see. But it's very important because it provides this protective layer. Then we have a number of layers of skin cells. Moving from the bottom, we have the stratum basale layer, clear up to the stratum corneum. I'll show you a list of them in the next slide. And all of them have some different functions. But I will point out here that the stratum basale layer is this very thin layer down at the bottom. It's not a very thick layer, but this is where the skin is actively dividing. Notice also how there's these ridges in our skin here. So all along the bottom of this epidermal layer, we have the stratum basale. The stratum basale layer is actively dividing. This is where your new skin cells are formed. As these skin cells are formed, they're going to move up this way. So your oldest cells are actually at the top of your skin, and your newest cells are down here at the bottom. Remember, the blood supply is here. And I guess I wrote off of the slide here. Let me fix that really quick. Here's our oldest layer. Here's our newest layer down here. Remember, the blood supply is in our dermal layer. And so new cells need a blood supply. They need those nutrients. Well, all cells need nutrients and oxygen. And so those nutrients and oxygen are readily available from the dermal layer. And so this is where the cells are actively dividing, doing mitosis, and producing new cells. Our skin stem cells are located here. And then as they move up, as new cells are formed, they push the older ones up above them until eventually they get to the stratum corneum. They're going to get sloughed off. And as they move away from the blood supply, they're going to lose these nutrients until they finally die. And so our stratum basale layer is a living layer, but by the time you get to the stratum corneum, these are basically dead cells, and they're filled with keratin, or we just call them keratinized. So keratin again is this protein, and as the cells are moving up here, they're filling with this protein, this keratin, that's going to help protect our skin cells. So here's a list of the layers, starting with the stratum basale, which is on the bottom. Then we move up to the stratum spinosum. We've talked a little bit about the stratum basale layer already. And then the stratum spinosum and the stratum granulosum. This is where keratinization continues, and these cells become more flattened. And then they die by the time they get to the stratum lucidum. So these are where our dead cells are, the stratum lucidum and the stratum corneum. The stratum lucidum isn't found in every layer of this isn't found in the skin all over our body. It's mainly found in thick, hairless skin. And if you think of where this is mainly on your palms of your hands and on the bottoms of your feet. And so it's a thicker layer, and it is see-through as well. And then we have the stratum corneum. The stratum corneum is the outer layer, as we pointed out. Again, by the time you get to the stratum corneum, these cells are totally filled with keratin. They're keratinized. They're cornified, is another word for that. And they're ready to be broken off. So that is the epidermal layer. Now let's look at the dermal layer. And I'll point out in this slide as well, there's something called the hypodermis, or the subcutaneous tissue. This is below the dermal layer. This is not part of the integumentary system, but it is basically a layer of fat that's found underneath the dermal layer. Okay, so the dermis has two layers. It has a papillary layer, and it has a reticular layer. The papillary layer is very small. You can see size-wise, here's a papillary layer, and the reticular layer makes up the majority of the dermis. Just as in the epidermis, the corneum, stratum corneum makes up the majority of the epidermis, and everything, all the other layers are small compared to that. So the reticular layer is the main part of this, the dermal layer. So the papillary layer has these little projections that I pointed out in the epidermal layer. They're also in the dermal layer, and they call these dermal papillae. And one of the things that this does is this gives us fingerprints on the ends of our fingers. So you can see how these different ridges are formed by the papillary layer, and that's how our fingerprints are formed. Then we have the reticular layer, and this is the deeper layer. And you can see we have our blood vessels, our arteries here, our veins coming in, inundating, going up into the dermal layer. We also have our sweat glands here in the skin, and then our oil glands, which are associated with hair follicles. And then we have our deep pressure receptors as well. So, let's grab this picture here and blow it up just a little bit. Alright, here you can see everything blown up just a little bit. So as we look at our papillary layer here, we can see the dermal papillae, these ridges here. Okay, we see the blood vessels coming up. But notice how the blood vessels do not go out of the dermal layer. They do not go up into the epidermal layer. Okay, we have our Meissner's corpuscles here, which are touch receptors. And then we have just nerve endings that are coming up here and just ending in this dermal area as well. Okay, and those are going to tell you if you're feeling pain or not. And then we have the Pacinian corpuscle here, which is also a deep pressure receptor, touch receptor. Then we have our sweat glands here. Okay, we have our sebaceous or oil glands here. Notice how all these are found in the dermal layer. And notice also how our hair follicles come clear down into the dermal layer. And we'll talk about those in a minute as well. Then I want to point out here we have this little muscle. So every hair in our skin, on here you can see a little bit better, every hair in our skin has a little smooth muscle attached called a erector pili muscle. And if you remember, smooth muscle is involuntary. We don't have any voluntary control over these. But when they contract, they cause our hair on our arms or wherever to stand up. And this is when we get goosebumps or goose pimples or whatever you might call them. So as this muscle contracts, it's going to pull down on the skin here, and you'll get a little dimple here, and then the hair will stand up straight over here. Alright, so that's an overview of the different parts of the integumentary system, the epidermis, the dermis, and the associated parts of those layers of the skin.